Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to another episode of Quran in English. My name is Ahmed, and I am happy to take you through the almost the final chapter of Yusuf. There's another 11 verses at the end. I don't know if I'll do them all, but I think I'll do them tomorrow as a small episode instead of today. But for now, the story of Yusuf concludes. I believe it concludes. I don't know what's in those the last 11 chapters, but either way, we see it all come together, and I'm very excited. And this is very, very cool. As usual, I must always explain that I'm not a Quranic scholar nor a Arabic linguist. I've not studied the Arabic language, and for a lot of the Quran, I am discovering it for the first time myself and just sharing my education journey with you. This is an educational channel. So if you learned something, great. And if you have something to teach me, by all means, drop it in the comments. I think we learn the best from each other. So, great. Excited. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. And off we go. Very excited. I was reading this earlier today, and I'm very, very excited about this. Very excited. Anyway, let's go.
قالوا إن يسرق فقد سرق أخ له من قبل فأسرها يوسف في نفسه ولم يبدها لهم قال أنتم شر مكانا والله أعلم بما تصفون.
So when last we left our wonderful tale, Yusuf had devised a plan to put a cup in his brother that he wanted to save in his bag to make it seem like he stole it so that he can capture him, keep him with him. And so that essentially this whole thing was getting back at his brothers and giving them what they deserve because they threw him in a well when he was younger. So here we come into that concept, and the brothers are saying, they say, if he steals, then verily he stole a brother of his from before. So now the brothers, what are they doing? Not only did they throw Yusuf in the well however long ago, they're now blaming, let's call him Benjamin because we don't have another name for him. They're now blaming Benjamin for also stealing Yusuf when he was younger. When Yusuf, who's in front of them, they don't know that it's Yusuf that is in front of them, is like, like, you're lying to my face. You're telling me all these things that aren't true. So it continues saying, but he kept it a secret, Yusuf, within himself. So he obviously knows that they're lying because it happened to him, and they're not telling the truth. What if I do this? Is this better? And then do. Sorry. I'm trying lighting situations halfway through. So he kept to himself that he knows the truth, and he did not reveal it to them, as the verse. And then he said, you are sharrun makanan, which means you are in such an evil position. And it's kind of like he didn't tell them that he knows, but he told them, like, essentially he knows. He's saying you're scum. You know, you're really, really garbage people. Like, you're not good people. And then he says, and God knows best about what you describe, what you're claiming. So God knows best. So, yeah, again, they lied about him, and they tried to throw his brother that stole things under the bus. It's wild. However, it continues.
قالوا يا أيها العزيز إن له أبا شيخا كبيرا فخذ أحدنا مكانه إنا نراك من المحسنين.
So they said, of course, their father told them, don't come back without, let's call him Benjamin because we don't have another name. Don't come back without the specific brother that I've sent you. I've entrusted him with you. And so they know if they're going to go back to their father, they made a covenant with God that we swear to God that we're going to take care of him. And if they go back without the brother, then they know the father is going to be completely distraught, and we'll see that shortly. So they said to Joseph, not knowing that it's Joseph, to the king's advisor, they said, "Oh, advisor, oh, Aziz, oh, chief minister, indeed he has a father that is old and he's old and great. He's a very old father, Kabir, Sheikh and Kabir. Like it's Kabir is also just an explanation, like a greatly old father. Like it's also a sign of respect that someone's old and he's a member of the society. Anyway, they say as an old father that's old of age. So take one of us in place of the brother, because they know that they have to bring the brother back. So just take any one of us. Indeed, we see you as one of the people who do good. So Yusuf's reply to them is,
قال معاذ الله أن نأخذ إلا من وجدنا متاعنا عنده إنا إذا لظالمون.
Yusuf said, obviously he kind of knows what's up, so he knows that they're going to get screwed. But he says, God forbid that we take, except the one who we found our possessions with him. So God forbid we take anybody else. If we were to take anybody else, indeed we would then be the wrongdoers. If we take anyone than the one that we found with, then we would be unjust, and that's not in our business. We have to take the one that we have to take.
فلما استيئسوا منه خلصوا نجيا قال كبيرهم ألم تعلموا أن أباكم قد أخذ عليكم موثقا من الله ومن قبل ما فرطتم في يوسف فلن أبرح الأرض حتى يأذن لي أبي أو يحكم الله لي وهو خير الحاكمين.
Okay, so when they completely despaired of him, they despaired of Yusuf, of Joseph, knowing that they're not going to get their brother back and that he has power over them and that he's overpowered them. They secluded themselves to private consultation. So the brothers went among themselves to talk about what should we do. So their eldest said, did you not know that your father had taken upon you an oath by God from before? Oh, and from before you failed. So he says, you've taken an oath by God from before you had failed in concerning Yusuf. So he tells them, you promised your father that you weren't going to give him Benjamin. You weren't going to give him the Benjamin. And then from before that, you also promised that Yusuf wasn't going to be taken. And then we obviously did what we did to Yusuf, and we lied to our father. So this is the second time we're lying about Benjamin. And if we go back now, it's going to be an issue. So he said, and he suggested, then I will not leave this land. I will stay in Egypt until my father permits to me or God decides for me. And he is the best of judges. So essentially, he's telling his brothers to go back without him. He's like, I'm going to stay with him. And we also see that he says, until God decides for me, which is kind of alluding at the main theme that we see within Yusuf. Because in Yusuf, the brothers were the villains to begin with. They put him in the well. They lied about him. And they even lied about him just now. They lied to Yusuf to his face, saying Benjamin kidnapped Yusuf when he was younger. So up until very recently, they were, behaving poorly. But then suddenly the eldest brother, I know is not doing much, but he's saying until God decides for me, and he is the best of judges. And in this moment, we see a transition. We see the brother shift from a villain to a believer, from a non-believer that is doing bad things to a believer and saying, you know what, I accept my fate. Whatever happens to me, happens to me. Which, for me, I think is one of the main themes of this session, of this story. But let's see how it goes.
ارجعوا إلى أبيكم فقولوا يا أبانا إن ابنك سرق وما شهدنا إلا بما علمنا وما كنا للغيب حافظين.
Don't do this to me. Don't do this to me. Okay. So he said, return to your father and say, oh, father, indeed your son has stolen, and we testify except what we know. We do not testify except with what we know, and we do testify except with what we know. And we were not of the unknown, the guardians. So the big brother's telling their brothers, go admit everything that happened. And, that's it. We no longer can scheme. We no longer can lie. Just tell the truth. He's like, why would Benjamin steal? We don't know. Because Benjamin didn't steal, but that's besides the point. So essentially he's just saying, yeah, just go back and testify. And, okay, I think it was right. I want to make sure that I read all. Because sometimes it does these things. Yeah, this is the elder saying that God is the best wise, and then he says, come back to your father, which is what we just read, and then
واسأل القرية التي كنا فيها والعير التي أقبلنا فيها وإنا لصادقون.
Now this I don't fully understand, because he says, and ask the town that we were in it, and the caravan that which we returned in it, and indeed we are surely truthful. We are telling the truth, people. Which I don't quite understand. Because the next verse talks about what his father says in return, but I don't understand what to ask the town that we were in or the caravan that we had returned to. And indeed, we are telling the truth. But anyway, their father says in return, after they tell him the whole story,
قال بل سولت لكم أنفسكم أمرا فصبر جميل عسى الله أن يأتيني بهم جميعا إنه هو العليم الحكيم.
He said, nay, so the father said, after he heard their story, nay, it has enticed for you yourselves something. So this was, again, the second time that the father has entrusted a brother with them, and they said he was going to protect him, and then they came back, and for the second time they said, we don't know what happened. The first time it was their fault, but the second time it wasn't exactly their fault, but it was being done to them because of something that was their fault, so it's a bit hard. And so the father naturally says, no, clearly something's gone wrong. There's some evil within your souls, and this is the problem. And then he says that beautiful statement again, فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلًا. But, so I'm going to be patient, and it's going to be beautiful. And again, it's that statement that he said in the very beginning, the very first time that they took Yusuf, and then they lost Yusuf, and they came back to him lying that the wolf had eaten Yusuf. He said, فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلًا. Which again testifies to Jacob's faith. Jacob being the father of Yusuf and Joseph. It testifies to his faith. And it testifies that even though he is suffering this unbearable pain for the second time in his life from his children, he feels like his children are doing something to his other children, and his heart is breaking. He says, فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلًا. I'll be patient and it'll be beautiful. And then he says, perhaps God will bring them to me all together. So this is a very interesting thing. It feels like some part of Jacob knows that Joseph, Yusuf, and Benjamin are fine and they're coming to him. Some part of him, some part of his psyche knows, because he says, maybe God will bring them both to me. You only say this if there's an inclination, there's a sort of... But what's important is that he is suffering now, and it kind of ties into why do we suffer and why do we need to go through these things, and what is the pain and what is heartache and why does suffering exists. but it'll be explained in a few more verses. And then Yaqub, Jacob says, "Indeed, God is the all-knowing and all-wise. So even in the most heartbreaking of setbacks that has happened to him again, you find Jacob, Yaqub, to be patient and trusting in God." And that's a lesson for all of us, really. When we suffer, that we have to just trust in God.
وتولى عنهم وقال يا أسفا على يوسف وابيضت عيناه من الحزن فهو كظيم.
This pain is so loud. So he turned away from them and he said, my grief over Yusuf, over Joseph. Because this kind of, what happened to Benjamin reminded him of Joseph, and he's like, what did Joseph go through all those years? He's kind of disconnected from his family. And like, obviously Joseph's been through a lot. So his grief that he's feeling is real. And Joseph was betrayed by his brothers and imprisoned and raped, or almost attempted rape. So you can just feel the pain, the grief over Joseph overcomes the father. And then it says, and his eyes became white from sadness, from grief, and he was out of the grief. Okay, the translation is a bit strange. His eyes turned white out of grief, for sure. His eyes turned white from grief. فهو كظيم. And he was, the way that I understood it was that he was depressed, and that his spirit was broken. Let's do it like this. And he was full of resentment. فهو كظيم. Yeah, he was full of resentment. He was depressed. And what they mean by his eyes became white is he became blind. He could no longer see. He was so grief-stricken that he couldn't see anymore. And this is the part of the suffering that is necessary to happen, because in his suffering is a lesson for the brothers. And before you think that is too extreme, let's get to the end of the story. But the point of the story is that this whole situation happened. The brothers came back. They broke their father's heart for the second time. And this time it made him blind.
قالوا تالله تفتأ تذكر يوسف حتى تكون حرضا أو تكون من الهالكين.
So they're worried about their father, and they say, by God, will you not cease to remember Joseph, Yusuf, until you become fatally ill, or you become one of the ones who will perish? So your life, you will die out of your grief for Joseph. And it's like, it still hasn't dawned on them that what they have done is so terrible, you know? They're still blaming Jacob for having grief over his son Joseph, instead of understanding how bad what they had done, what they did was from before. They can only see how badly it's affecting their father, and therein lies the lesson for them, that they see that their father is going to die from the grief of what they had done. And it's about Joseph. Notice what he's saying. He was saying it's about Joseph, not about the current brother, which is ironic, because in some sense, Jacob had a feeling that the Benjamin was fine, but Joseph was the one that suffered. Because Benjamin is fine, but Joseph is the one that went through all those pain and those tribulations. So he says, the father responds to them, saying, why are you holding on to the grief of Joseph until death?
قال إنما أشكو بثي وحزني إلى الله وأعلم من الله ما لا تعلمون.
He said, I only complain my suffering and my grief to God, and I know from God what you do not know. Which is very interesting, because again, Jacob has gone blind out of grief. So he says, I know what you do not know. But it's not that he knows that Jacob is okay and ruling the world and ruling Egypt and in a high stature. He's still holding the grief for the loss of his son. And his son also went through hell, was imprisoned, was almost raped by the family that brought him in, and was thrown into a well by his brothers. Lots of trauma. So his sadness isn't misplaced. And he's saying, I'm not being sad for you. I'm saying being sad for God. But I think he also knows that his grief that he's showing is necessary in a way. He knows that his pain is a part of someone else's punishment. So he accepts his pain and he accepts his sadness and he emotes it. He accepts his suffering as a way of God's justice in a way, which is very interesting. So he says,
يا بني يذهبوا فتحسسوا من يوسف وأخيه ولا تيأسوا من روح الله إنه لا ييأس من روح الله إلا القوم الكافرون.
So he says, "Oh, my sons, go and inquire and feel about Yusuf and his brother." Again, they don't mention his brother's name. I don't know why. But again, he tells them to go look for Joseph, look for Yusuf, and look for his brother. Again, it ties into Jacob knowing things that they don't know. And even though he's sad and suffering, he knows that look for Joseph. Don't give up. And then he says specifically, and do not despair from the mercy of God, from the Spirit of God. I feel like the Spirit of God so in a way, the Spirit of God, in a way, the mercy of God. The mercy of God, that God can give mercy at any point and save those, the wretched, so to speak, save those suffering, save something that you might have thought is impossible, is possible. But it's also the Spirit of God. Don't not have God in your heart. God is capable of everything. So he says, do not despair from the mercy of God. That's fine. Indeed, no one despairs from the mercy of God except for a people that are disbelievers. No one loses hope in God's mercy except for those who have no faith. So, yeah, I like mercy of God, but I also like Spirit of God, God's will, God's forgiveness. It does include God's mercy. I do agree, but I think it's a bit more min ruh because the word literally is the Spirit of God. But it is meant as the mercy of God. Essentially, don't give up. Don't despair. And this kind of really showcases Jacob's faith, and it showcases his instruction to his kids. His boys, he's still telling them, believe. Don't disbelieve. And even though I'm blind, even though it's as bad as you can imagine it, even though you've lost another brother, don't despair and have faith. That is his advice. And that's something that we can all take advice from, because it's easy to despair in this world.
فلما دخلوا عليه قالوا يا أيها العزيز مسنا وأهلنا الضر وجئنا ببضاعة مزجاة فأوف لنا الكيل وتصدق علينا إن الله يجزي المتصدقين.
Interesting. So they came back to Joseph. So when they entered upon him, they came back to Joseph, and they said, again, they still don't know that it's him. They think that he's just the chief handler, the treasurer of Egypt. They said, "Oh, Aziz." Aziz means, "Oh, the mighty one, oh, chief minister." And then they were just honest, and they were saying, "It has touched us and our family adversity and suffering. And yeah, we're at our wits' end. We don't have much to offer." And then they say, "We have come with goods that are of little value. So if you could pay that full to us, but then also be charitable upon us. So essentially they're saying, A, that we are in complete despair, and that we are in need of mercy, and it's kind of an acceptance of the suffering. And then they say something, after they ask for be charitable upon us, they say, indeed, God rewards the charitable. And again, this small statement of God rewards the charitable shows that A, they accept their suffering, B, that they've turned to God, asking him to have mercy upon them. And they're asking it through the treasurer and through Joseph. In other words, they're coming back to Joseph on their knees, begging, saying, please be charitable to us. So we see a complete reversal from the start of the story, where they threw him in the well and they didn't like that he was special, to the point where they needed his special ability, and they came to him for God's mercy. Which, if anyone who has ever wished for revenge, you kind of wish that people come back to you and they get on their knees and they ask you to help them, please, especially after they've hurt you in the past. I mean, I've definitely fantasized about that in the past. So it's kind of, I mean, it feels interesting. And then Joseph says,
قال هل علمتم ما فعلتم بيوسف وأخيه إذ أنتم جاهلون.
And then he said, do you know what you did with Joseph, and his brother, if أنتم جاهلون, if you are ignorant? So here he's kind of saying, do you know what you did to Joseph? Do you understand what you did? Do you understand what throwing him in the well meant? What kind of life he had? Like, and his brother Benjamin as well. Again, you also did the same to Benjamin. You kind of claimed that you're going to protect him, but you couldn't. Like, do you know what you've done? Do you really know what you've done? And here Joseph is telling them, by the way, the jig is up. I know. I see you. Here we are. So then they respond,
قالوا أئنك لأنت يوسف قال أنا يوسف وهذا أخي قد من الله علينا إنه من يتق ويصبر فإن الله لا يضيع أجر المحسنين.
And herein for me lies the whole main point and the main story of the chapter of Yusuf. Anyway, Joseph tells them, by the way, the jig is up. Do you know what you did to your brother in this? So they said, oh, are you sure that you, Joseph? Are you our brother? Are you the one? And they finally see, and they said, they recognize that he is. So he says, I am Yusuf, I am Joseph, and this is my brother. And he brings out Benjamin. And indeed, from God, God has been gracious upon us. God has been gracious upon us. And then he continues to say, which is the main point of this chapter, indeed, he who fears God, or is mindful of God, and is patient, then God does not waste the reward of those who do good. And a lot of times we kind of think of the concept of heaven and hell as the only time that we are going to this is a heavy topic. Heaven and hell being the only time that we get rewarded, which for some people it might be that they only get the reward in heaven. But in this story of Joseph, we do see that sometimes in this world, justice is given to those who do good. So don't despair. Be mindful of God, fear God, and be patient. And God will not waste your reward. You being good will pay off. May God have mercy upon those who are in need of his mercy now. Whew, heavy.
قالوا تالله لقد آثرك الله علينا وإن كنا لخاطئين.
And here we see the brothers admit. They say, by God, God has certainly preferred you over us. And indeed, we have been mistaken. We have been sinners. We have been sinful. Mistaken is more correct. And here is the penny finally dropping, and them understanding that they messed up, and that Joseph was something special, and that their jealousy of him was from the devil, and that they were manipulated, and that they were tricked. And essentially here they're saying, we were wrong to do that to you. You are a good person. We see that God has preferred you, and we are sorry. Essentially is what they're saying. So what does Joseph tell them?
قال لا تثريب عليكم اليوم يغفر الله لكم وهو أرحم الراحمين.
Of course, Yusuf is one of God's messengers, so he has God's grace. So he said, there is no blame upon you today. Immediately, they say, we're sorry, we were wrong. You were chosen. We know that we were wrong. And he says, there's no blame upon you today. God will forgive you. And he is the most merciful and the one whose mercy is most encompassing. Yeah. Surprise, surprise. God's messenger shows a bit of God's mercy. And he trusts God, and he says God forgives you, because he knows that it was all supposed to be, it was all going to plan. But we still have Jacob, who's blind back home. So what are we going to do about that?
اذهبوا بقميصي هذا فألقوه على وجه أبي يأت بصيرا وأتوني بأهلكم أجمعين.
So Joseph says, go with this shirt of mine and cast it upon the face of my father, and he will regain sight. And then bring me your family all together. Interesting, exciting. And it's even more cool than that. Next.
ولما فصلت العير قال أبوهم إني لأجد ريح يوسف لولا أن تفندون.
And then even just as their caravan started heading back, it says, and when departed their caravan, when it started heading towards them, before it even reached their father's land, as soon as their caravan departed, their father back home said, indeed, I find the smell of Yusuf. I smell Joseph, and Joseph's coming to me. Like the wind carried the scent of Joseph from the shirt all the way to the father's house, way ahead of them. And this is, again, travel from way back when, where people used to travel for a long period of time. And he says, I smell Joseph, I smell Yusuf, even though you think that I have a weak mind. Lawla an tafniduni. You may think I'm senile, you might think that I'm weakened in mind, but I smell Joseph. He's like, I know it sounds crazy, but I smell my son. And then the people around him, again, the people around him are saying, oh, you smell your son that's not here? So what do they say?
قالوا تالله إنك لفي ضلالك القديم.
So they say, and again, we see this time and time again with messengers, the people around him said, by God, indeed you surely are in error that is of old. You are still in your old delusion. You're still thinking about about Joseph, you're still thinking about Joseph. Oh my God, you're so silly. Which we all know that he's not silly. We all know that the people around him are the ones that are silly. And they're the ones deluded. But it's kind of like the lifestyle of the messenger, right? He's not to be believed until he's to be believed.
فلما أن جاء البشير ألقاه على وجهه فارتد بصيرا قال ألم أقل لكم إني أعلم من الله ما لا تعلمون.
So when arrived the bearer of good tidings, one of the brothers with the shirt, he cast upon his face, he cast Joseph's shirt upon Jacob's face. So then his sight returned. And here you can see how happy Jacob is and how excited, and because he knows my son's alive, he's okay. He's not only is he okay, he knows that everything's going to be okay, that I'm going to meet my sons again, my long lost son, we're going to get there. And he said, did I not say to you that, Jacob says, did I not say to you that indeed I know from God what you do not know? So even though he despaired, even though he lost his sight, he still had faith in God, and he still needed to lose his sight. He still needed to be depressed. He still needed to have that effect on his children so that his boys can feel the regret and can learn the lesson that they needed to learn. And all of it was a part of God's plan. Even Jacob's suffering was a part of God's plan. And even though he was suffering, he said, I know what you do not know, and I have faith in God. And that's why he never gave up. And that's his advice to his boys, as they were leaving. Even as he was blind, he was like, don't give up on the mercy of God. Believe in the mercy of God, you know?
قالوا يا أبانا استغفر لنا ذنوبنا إنا كنا خاطئين.
It's beautiful. It really is. So they said, "O Father, forgive us our sins. Indeed, we have been wrong. We were wrong. We have mistaked." And again, here, this is the second time that we see them. First, they said it to Yusuf. Now they say it to Jacob, to his father, and they say, "We're sorry. We're wrong. We did you wrong. We're so sorry. And please forgive us." And the whole, also kind of, the whole parable, the whole story of Yusuf is filled with people that do wrong, see the error of their ways, and then make things right at a much later date. Sometimes it's just by asking for forgiveness. Sometimes it's just by owning up and saying that I was mistaken. Sometimes it's by clearing the name of Yusuf, as the wife of the man that raised him did. She cleared his name. You know, one of the lessons that I've learned from this is that even if someone does wrong, even if someone does sin, even if the devil does affect you and make you do some terrible things, there's always room for growth and forgiveness, and you're not doomed forever. Just because there are believers and non-believers doesn't mean that a person who is a non-believer will stay that way forever. You do not know. God's mercy can come at any point in time. So they asked their father for forgiveness. What does their father say?
قال سوف أستغفر لكم ربي إنه هو الغفور الرحيم.
This is interesting. Jacob's response is a little bit different than Joseph's. Jacob says, I will ask for forgiveness for you from my Lord. Indeed, he is the oft forgiving and most merciful. And the difference between what Yusuf said and what Jacob said is, Yusuf first said, there is no blame upon you today. And then he said, God will forgive you. And he is the most merciful and whose mercy is most encompassing. Whereas Jacob said, I will ask for forgiveness for you from God. Indeed, he is the oft forgiving and most merciful. And I wonder why there is a difference between the two. Joseph said, God will forgive you. Jacob said, I will ask God for your forgiveness. Only God can give you your forgiveness. Does it mean that Joseph could speak for God? Because he says God will forgive you rather than I will ask God for forgiving you. Does it talk about the differences in humbleness between them, that Jacob was more humble and therefore he had to ask God rather than speak for God? Does it talk about the differences? Because they're both messengers, right? Both Jacob and Yusuf. Yaqub and Yusuf. Jacob and Joseph. I have to say the Arabic names together or the English names together. So it's very interesting. It's just the difference between a father and a son. Maybe it's also to do with their age, right? Maybe the older we get, the softer we become, and the more that we refer to God and appreciate it. I can definitely tell you that I'm a lot more headstrong than my father, for sure. And I find that my father is softer now than he was before. So maybe it just has something to do with age. But either way, both of them obviously mention God. One is saying that God will forgive you, and one is saying, I'll ask God to forgive you. And maybe it has to do with the pain that they suffered. Maybe that Jacob was still suffering a bit more pain. I don't know. It's just curious. It's interesting. Last two verses for today.
فلما دخلوا على يوسف آوى إليه أبويه وقال ادخلوا مصر إن شاء الله آمنين.
So when the whole family entered upon Joseph, he took himself to his parents, and he said, this just makes me so happy. And he said, enter Egypt, if God wills. Enter Egypt safely. Enter Egypt, God willing, in security. Enter Egypt safely, God willing. And it's making me tear up a little bit, because like this moment is the moment that everyone who is separated from a loved one by force feels, that wishes for. You wish for the moment that you get to hold the person that you were forcibly removed from whatever circumstance, and you just want to hold them again and tell them everything's going to be okay, you know? And it's such a powerful, powerful moment. And even in this powerful joy and glory, of course, Yusuf mentions God. He says, enter Egypt safely if God wills it. Even in his most happiest of moments, he remembers God. And even in his most darkest of moments, he remembered God. Both ways. You always have to remember God and never let God out of your mind, is also kind of a powerful lesson. And then the last verse for today is a spicy one, because it calls back to the very first few verses, the dream that Joseph had in the beginning. Anyway, let's hear it.
ورفع أبويه على العرش وخروا له سجدا وقال يا أبت هذا تأويل رؤياي من قبل قد جعلها ربي حقا وقد أحسن بي إذ أخرجني من السجن وجاء بكم من البدو من بعد أن نزغ الشيطان بيني وبين إخوتي إن ربي لطيف لما يشاء إنه هو العليم الحكيم.
It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. Anyway, and Joseph raised his parents upon the throne. And here, the way that I imagine it is the way that it was described in the very beginning. In the beginning, Joseph's dream said that I see 11 planets and the sun and the moon bowing towards me. So I imagine both the mother and the father and the 11 brothers, which means that I think that there were 12 brothers in total. Because I don't think Joseph was praying to himself. But anyway, he raised his father to the throne, and they fell down to him, prostrating, bowing, putting their heads to the floor. And then Joseph said to his father, "Oh, father, this is the interpretation of the vision, the dream, vision or dream, because the vision can happen within a dream, of the vision that I had from before. God has made it true. God has truly made it true. And he was good to me when he took me out of the prison, and he had brought me to you from the Bedouin life. And he brought you from the Bedouin life from after that. He brought you from the Bedouin life from after the devil had caused discord between me and between my brothers." So he says, God was good in getting me out of prison, and God was good in getting you out of the desert and into the city. After the devil caused dissension between my brothers and me, and the devil affected my brothers to hurt me this way. But the main focus of what Joseph is saying is that he got me out of prison, and he got you out of the desert through the pain and suffering, but it was in the end for something good. And he says, "Indeed, my Lord is kind to whom he wills." It says most subtle, but I feel like kind is a more accurate translation of latif. Lima yasha. Is kind to whom he wills, and indeed he is all-knowing and all-wise. So this is the last verse for today's session. There's still 11 more verses, and I'm going to save them until tomorrow. It's going to be a short video tomorrow, but that was the schedule, and I'm going to do it. And it's kind of the main story. The story of Yusuf is so beautiful, it's so wonderful, and it's a story of patience, and it's a story of God's mercy, and it's a story of good people getting affected by the devil and doing terrible, terrible things, and then repenting and becoming better people at a later point in time. And it's interesting. It's a very dramatic story because there's lots that happen and lots of excitement and lots of interesting, but it all's well that ends well. And all we have to do is be patient, be mindful of God, and God's mercy will be upon us. Beautiful, 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 beautiful story. Thank you all for watching. As usual, we always end with Sadaqallahu al-Ali al-Azim. Thank you all for watching. I appreciate you. I love you. See you guys tomorrow. Ma salame. Bye.